Hello everyone and welcome back to another video where today I want to talk about something that I didn't think I'd be talking about today, but my Twitter timeline has absolutely been blowing up with, so I wanted to talk about it. And that is the suggestion that Paul Mcgann, yes, Paul Mcgann, could be making a return to TV Doctor Who in the very near future. Now there is a bit of evidence for this, so I'm going to take you all through it. And obviously this would be his, I believe, third appearance in TV Doctor Who since the movie, if this is true. Obviously 2013 we had him in The Night of the Doctor Short, and we also had him in Power of the Doctor as well, but people have been clamouring for a more substantive role for Paul Mcgann on television, given that he's like the only mainline numbered Doctor to not really have, you know, a full era on TV or a full shake as the character. And so this has naturally gotten people very excited. Now, there's two major origin points for this rumour, so I'm going to go over both of them, and then I'm going to kind of give you my thoughts on if this is happening, and if it does, what it could actually be. So sit back, relax, subscribe, and let's get right into it. So the first time I heard this rumour was actually a couple of months ago, where someone added me in the following tweet. This was back in September, by the way. The reason I didn't cover this back then is frankly because, I mean, no disrespect to Thomas here who added me in this, but I get added in rumours like this all the time, and, you know, I tend not to sort of cover them unless I think that, oh, there's something like backing them, or like, if they're from Reddit or certain sources and stuff, then yeah, that's different. But obviously, you know, I get added in all sorts of rumours all the time, so I don't want to just, you know, talk about all of them. But the reason I'm talking about this one today is because there's been some further evidence that there may be some weight to it. So this is from Thomas James over on Twitter. Oh my god, my cousin, who is currently employed by Bad Wolf Productions, has just met Paul Mcgann. According to him, Mcgann was being shown around the studios by a producer. He was jolly and nice and very enthusiastic in meeting everyone there. But, at William Who, at Theories Whitey, or the rest of you Doctor Who nerds get excited, my cousin did say that there are several active filming projects going on at the studio at present, with more set to start filming within the next month for 2026-2027 release. So although the 8th Doctor may be in the building, it might not be for a house call. So there you go, this was the rumour. Obviously the reason I can cover it, and again, you know, obviously nothing on Thomas James at all, is, you know, mainly because I get added in stuff like this all the time. And initially when I read it, I was kind of like, okay, your cousin was there, you know, it kind of gives that vibe of like my dad works for Microsoft kind of vibes. But in all fairness to Thomas, he was also one of the people who said that when the BBC said that Doctor Who would be carrying on about Disney, his cousin said the exact same thing. And he also recently made a post talking about stuff that he'd heard for, I believe it was the 2026 specials, which I don't think I've covered yet. Maybe I'll cover that in a separate video. But point being, he has covered stuff since that I think has turned out to be true, so I'm giving him some credit. Obviously, I'm trying to kind of present you with the facts, and obviously I'm trying to present it in as neutral way as possible. But I'm just telling you why I, you know, wasn't initially convinced. But, this kind of got some more steam recently when Gallifrey 1, which is the big American convention for Doctor Who, announced that Paul Mcgann had to withdraw from his 2026 convention appearance due to new acting work that will keep him busy for the first half of the year. Disappointing, yes. We know many of you have been eager to see him back. So there you go, that's the statement from Gallifrey 1. And all of this, you know, obviously sightings of him apparently being at Bad Wolf Studios, combined with him now cancelling a convention appearance, meaning that he will not be available for the first half of 2026, and the fact that this is, you know, a new role or a new, you know, acting role, kind of implies that this is a recent development, i.e. maybe he was talking to them a couple of months ago, and now he's finally doing it. The way that Gallifrey 1 words this, though, is interesting. They say that he'll be busy for the first half of the year. Now, it's important to say that this just might not be Doctor Who. This might be something else. There are several projects going on at Wolf Studios at any one given time. And even outside of Wolf Studios, obviously Gallifrey 1 themselves doesn't say that that's who he's doing the work for. So it could just be that he's got other commitments with other studios. Do you know what I mean? However, the kind of convenience of the timing of this, you know, you've got Paul Mcgann visiting a couple months ago, followed by an official announcement of Doctor Who returning at Christmas, and then the announcement of him pulling back from probably the biggest Doctor Who convention he could go to in 2026 because he has other commitments right around the time that that special would probably have to start filming. is very, very interesting. Again, I want to say quickly that this is not necessarily 100% proof in and of itself. It could just all be coincidences. It could be Doctor Who fans seeing patterns in things that aren't there, since we're talking about the 8th Doctor, to use that line. However, if we're to say hypothetically that this was happening and Paul Mcgann is returning to Doctor Who under Bad Wolf, what could this actually be? Well, there's been kind of a lot of speculation as to what this could be. Perhaps most obviously, and it's something that I've alluded to, is him making an appearance in the 2026 Christmas special in some capacity. What capacity that would be, I don't know, and what like narrative significance he would have, I don't really know. Especially because, and my worry with that is if he was in the special with Billie Piper, that special already has so much to address. You've already got all the hanging plot threads from the Gatwa era that need cleaning up. You've got to address the Billie Piper elephant in the room. I'd be highly surprised if David Tennant didn't make an appearance. And with all that already going on, where does Paul Mcgann fit into a story like that? People have pointed out, however, that there is precedent for this, with there being a comic where the 8th Doctor meets a version of, like, the Bad Wolf, basically, with the 11th Doctor. So people are saying that maybe this special is taking inspiration from that. I somewhat doubt it, though, for a couple of reasons. For one thing, that's kind of a niche thing to reference. For two, as much as we all love Paul Mcgann as fans, he's not really the draw for audiences in the same way that, like, a Tennant is. That's just the sad truth. I think he should be. I absolutely love Paul Mcgann. He's one of my favourite actors to do it. But as a general audience member, is that going to be something that they're going to understand on Christmas Day? Maybe, maybe not. And the other element as well is that Russell T Davies has been very outspoken previously in saying that he's not a huge multi-Doctor fan. That's why he did Regeneration in the 60th. It's kind of a middle ground type thing. So the idea of him potentially bowing out on a multi-Doctor with Paul Mcgann, Billie Piper, potentially others, I don't know. It doesn't quite feel like in character for Russell, although then again, having said that, I wouldn't have said that about several of his decisions recently if you'd have told me about them a couple of years ago, so who knows. And maybe he does just want to give one last big, you know, love letter to the show and to the fans before he leaves, if that is indeed what's happening. The other idea I have, though, and I actually think that this is a lot more likely to be the case if he's coming back in any capacity, is some kind of Tales of the TARDIS kind of short or mini episode or something like that. You know, something in the vein of Time Crash, something smaller that we can all watch on iPlayer, or, you know, like in the same vein as like the Children in Need sketches. Something smaller, perhaps to tie in with the fact that, and many people have pointed this out, next year will also mark 30 years of the television movie. So maybe it could be a Tales of the TARDIS of the TV movie. The issue with that, though, is that the TV movie famously is a bit of a rights nightmare, given the fact that it was produced under Fox, which is now owned by Disney, and, you know, Doctor Who and Disney recently parted ways, so would they agree for them to use the rights for that? Who even owns the rights for that? You know, there's that whole kind of element of it as well, which is why, if you're curious, you'll never see photos from the TV movies used on Big Finish box art, because they legally can't. Same reason why you'll never see Grace or Chang Li in Big Finish, or if you do see the actors, they're playing different roles because those characters are, you know, caught up in a bunch of like legal stuff because it's not technically a BBC thing. It's all over the place, but that's why with the TV movie you don't see as much of it referenced by the show or by recent Big Finish. And so would a Tales of the TARDIS for the TV movie even be possible? Maybe it's something they agreed with Disney before they parted ways, like give us the rights to the TV movie, because realistically, why would Disney want it? I don't know. It's just a weird situation. I mean, we do know that they obviously managed to get the rights for it on BBC iPlayer, so maybe that indicates that there's some shift there. I don't know. Again, this is all incredibly speculative. The other and probably least likely idea that this could be, but would probably be my absolute favorite idea, is the idea of this maybe being some kind of mini-series in between the Christmas special and whatever comes after it. Maybe produced by Bad Wolf Studios, but written by, you know, somebody else that isn't, you know, Russell. Kind of similarly to what we're going to have with War Between, you know, something to kind of fill the gap. Because I imagine if they were to do like a 6-episode miniseries type thing with Paul Mcgann, that's something that you could do a lot cheaper, you could do with a lot less locations, and it would be something to tie Doctor Who fans over. It would do very, very well with the fan base, and I'm sure, like, you know, in terms of things like DVD and Blu-ray sales, I'm sure people would love to pick up you know, a Paul Mcgann miniseries. I would do that, and I'm sure many people would as well. So if they want something economical that can keep Doctor Who tiding over while they figure out what they're going to do with it for the future, a Paul Mcgann pit stop, as we're calling it, might actually make perfect sense. I think that's fairly unlikely though, mainly because they don't really know what's going on in the main show at the moment. I just don't imagine them prioritizing a Paul Mcgann miniseries at this point in time. If anything, I think that if that was ever going to happen, it would have had to have been at a point where Doctor Who was doing better, not necessarily in more of a limbo state. But again, as I said, you know, maybe it's a case that they need something to fill the calendar, and this is a very easy, very fan-pleasy thing you could do, and all the fans would immediately get on board. Everyone already loves Paul Mcgann in the role. He's not really as oversaturated in the way that like a David Tennant is. Star Wars as well does this all the time with like shows set in different eras of Star Wars, so it's not like an impossible idea. I always thought if they did do a Paul Mcgann spin-off, they should film it as though it's like the 90s, like you could even have it in like a 4:3 kind of aspect ratio. You could kind of make the effects kind of have that retro feel to it, and you could kind of market it as the lost season we never got in between, you know, the movie and the show coming back in 2005. Something like that would be very cool. Do I think that's going to happen? No. I think the most likely thing is this is nothing, and we're all, you know, finding a coincidence in things that aren't there. After that, probably the second most likely thing would be some kind of Tales of the TARDIS mini episode thing, potentially, you know, to tie into comic relief for, you know, children in need or something like that, you know, something small, or it is just a BBC iPlayer exclusive thing like Tales of the TARDIS is. Next up, obviously, would be him doing something for the 2026 special. We don't really know anything about that yet, including cast members, but my reason for skepticism with that is just how much that's probably going to have to deal with, but I'm not going to completely write it off, given, you know, how much stuff that sounded insane a few years ago has now come to pass in the main show. And then finally, the least likely, but I think the thing I would love the most, is some sort of mini-series with Paul done by Bad Wolf to kind of placate the gap between seasons. I think that would be awesome. And again, it could work in a similar capacity to War Between, but I don't actually think that's happened. As much as I would love it, I don't see it at the moment. But if they do want to do it, you know, they've got to try and make sure that it's done in the next few years, because, you know, these actors aren't around forever. It's something I say before. And like, you know, Paul Mcgann still looks great. You know, he still looks like he could easily slip into that costume. I mean, he does it regularly for conventions and he still looks great in it. He did it for Power of the Doctor as well. So you definitely could do it, but that's not going to be the case forever. So if they do want to do that, then they need to get their skates on. But this was more just me talking about the speculation. Don't take any of this as read or as like, you know, immediate confirmation that, oh yeah, we're getting a new Paul Mcgann show next year. I don't think we will, you know. Realistically, I don't think that's happening, but it's nice to dream, isn't it? I know I'd love it. But let me know in the comments below what you guys think. If you did enjoy this video, please do leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you later.